Now, Don McCullin is no stranger to invasion, revolution and uprising. He is perhaps best known as a photographer of conflict and combat in battle zones from Vietnam to the Falklands, and currently has an exhibition at the Imperial War Museum North and a book just out, both tellingly titled Shaped by War. He has also captured the stresses of social collapse and catastrophe from Belfast to Biafra in the harsh grain of his pictures. Much of this has, of course, involved travelling to remote parts of the earth under difficult circumstances, only to find even harder conditions when he got there. I've always wanted to know whether home was somewhere he wanted to get back to or away from. Has photographing still lifes and landscapes around his home in Somerset brought him a sense of stillness? And has he found tranquillity in taking pictures of ancient ruins on his journeys across the Roman Empire, work he has recently published under the title Southern Frontiers? Fortunately, I'm in a position to find out the answers to those questions, as he is in the BBC Bath studio. Don, home, as a younger man, was it somewhere you wanted to get away from at the beginning of your career?
Yes, most certainly, because I grew up in an appalling slum, really, in North London. And my whole family lived in 2 rooms. There were no indoor loos or bathrooms and things like that. So absolutely, I couldn't wait to get away from there. And it was also quite a bigoted area, and most of the people were uneducated. And we all left school at the age of 14, 15. So there was nothing there for us but, you know, the ideal kind of escape kind of route out, if you could find it.
And so photography, what was that escape route? But how did you get involved with that? As you said, you had little education.
Well, I was obliged to do my national service, and I thought, I don't want to be an infantry soldier, so I volunteered for the RAF, and they took me, and then I was stationed in RAF Benson in Oxfordshire, and I thought, I don't want to be stuck here, you know, I'll try and request a posting. So I wound up going to Egypt, which was amazing, because looking back on it now, it seemed as if that, you know, the hand of fate was, you know, pointing my destinations, you know, for the future of my life.
So that first taste of foreign travel to Egypt with the RAF, did that set you on a trail of thinking, I must do more, I want to explore more of the world?
Well, it was a pretty appalling place to be sent, because, you know, it has all the rings of, like, God, this is going to be fantastic and that. But of course, I was literally dumped behind a barbed wire enclosure for a whole year, until I was eventually sent to Nairobi, because the Mau Mau War was on. This is in 1955, and things started looking up. I suddenly found I had, you know, decent things to eat, and I wasn't surrounded by barbed wire, and I was surrounded by beautiful countryside and spectacular game parks.
And when you came back after national service, having had that taste of travel, the photography then gave you the chance, I think initially working for the Observer newspaper, to travel the UK and then get further afield again.
Well, I came back to a pretty miserable situation, back to North London again, and I thought, you know, I've just had this wonderful experience going all the way through the Middle East and Africa. I mean, it somehow sent me back to the prison once I got my national service through. And I'm not going to say luckily, but there was a confrontation with the people I grew up with, and a policeman tried to intervene and was murdered. And the man who did it was eventually hung. And I took my photographs to the Observer newspaper, who you know, printed my photographs and paid me gave me £50. Yeah. And I thought, my God, my life's, you know, taking off again. So I'm not going to waste this chance. And I did that. They gave me a contract of 15 guineas a week. And I did 2 days a week. But in the meantime, I sent myself off to the Berlin Wall when it was being built. And that was another twinge of what was out there, what could be obtained if I reached out a little further. And it was extraordinary going to Berlin in 1961 and seeing the wall built. And we're in the John le Carré era of the Cold War.
Yeah. I mean, you were going to places that perhaps weren't an easy escape, if you like, from North London, from Finsbury Park. You were places that were dangerous or very tense, like Berlin, and then further afield as your career grew as a photographer to places like Afghanistan, war zones. What was travelling in the 60s, 70s, or the 70s and 80s like, getting out to these remote places?
Well, they were the golden years of travel, I think, because, you know, you could go to places like Afghanistan. I mean, the thought today would be the most dreadful contemplations. Where would I start? What would I do? What would I take? And, you know, you could go through Iran and places like that. It was dead easy to travel. And people did just that. They went to Iran, Afghanistan on their way to India. You can't do that these days. And in the old days, I must say this, that when I approached London Airport, there was an excitement in my stomach. And, you know, I go there today with dread. I actually hate this security world we've now, brought upon ourselves. We didn't do it deliberately, but it's there. It's a fact of life. And, I almost have an inclination, is there time for me to get back in the car and go home?
Really, you just had. I was wondering how you prepare to travel, going off often for long stints in very remote places under difficult circumstances. Did you travel very stripped back in terms of luggage?
Yes. First of all, I took 3 cameras, 2 light meters, 20 rolls of film, and the occasional box of ready breakfast for my, because I'm always worried about waking up in the morning and being hungry. That's my big. And of course, I had, when you're young and you've got all this excess energy, you could, nothing somehow was going to defeat me. But hunger in the morning. In fact, I remember waking up once in Vietnam and saying I was hungry, and the American advisor said, "Can I get you something?" And I said yes, and of course it turned out to be field rat that was fried and with some onions to cover it up, So I have all these worries which I don't have this day and age because I stay in better places.
Well, that's true. Not too much field rat. I hope. You mentioned there that nowadays you get a feeling of dread approaching Heathrow or Gatwick, wherever it might be. But what about when you had a couple of experiences of photographing in war zones, seeing people suffering in other disasters? Was there a feeling of dread of thinking, oh, I'm going back to another place where there is dreadful human suffering, where I will be in danger?
No, the thing is that I said to myself, I had a certain kind of, attitude about this. If you take the ticket and get on the airplane, when you get there, don't start crying wolf and saying, God, I shouldn't be here. No, I had a dedication in my work. And I did my work in the most kind of ritual way of good behavior, compassion. I've seen other journalists not particularly behaving well in those places. I had my own way of working. I loved working alone, and I did all my best work alone because I could allow my own dignity to kind of incorporate, the balance that was necessary, not to offend. After all, do these people need a photographer when they're starving and dying and they're in shock and God knows what? No, they don't, of course. So I had my way of doing things, and it was a silent way, a quiet way, and I came away. And to go back to your question, when I went there, I was prepared in a way to see what I was going to see. There was a premeditation about all of it, and the experience of having done it for years and years.
There's a great sense in many of your photographs, of course some of them are absolutely iconic, where the subject may be looking at you, a child in Biafra, someone in Africa, or a young man in Beirut who may be their life may be about to end, and yet they're looking at you with a kind of softness in their eyes. Is that something that you comes from the fact that you were able to generate an atmosphere around you that wasn't threatening or indeed trying to take something from them?
I think there was a kind of almost a plea bargaining in their eyes to say, can you help me? Can you stop this? And sadly enough, one could never do that. And, it was, I've seen things that, they haunt me to this day. And I can't complain about it because I was the one who took myself there. I wasn't forced to go there. So there are too many memories crammed into my head. And, I'm inclined to want to go to places this day and age where I don't have to see people looking for the last time with those eyes at me and say, can you help me, when I knew I couldn't.
Many of the places you went to would have been physically beautiful, stunning, particularly coming for someone coming in those days from North London, as well as trying to get close to and capturing that sense of humanity, even in the most inhumane situations. Were you able to capture the sense of place too, the landscapes around you?
I must confess that I've been to some of the most extraordinary places in the world, and it wasn't always convenient when they were kind of married up to the wars that were going on, the starvations. The Sahel in Africa and the extraordinary Tuaregs and the death of their cattle and their herds of camels. I've seen extraordinary things in my life. And, for a very sad little boy from North London who had no education, I think I've done rather well on that kind of thin thread that I used to trade on. And at the end of the day, there aren't many places in this world I haven't been to, which I'm not